you. So I think it's been an exciting day so far, and I think we're going to see a lot of overlap. And when Divya and I were trying to plan this out and talk about collaboration, I need you to know that none of the speakers spoke to each other before the conference, and I think there's some really cool themes coming through that. So we're either all very narrow-minded and we all think alike, but I think on our narrow ledge we're innovative. So if you can be innovative and narrow-minded, I don't know, but so here we go. As everybody has done, I wanted you to meet some people that I keep in mind when I give a presentation. This is Damian, and Damian arrived in our clinic with his dad. You can't tell by his dad, but his dad, I believe, was 16 or 17 years old. So his ability to access community services and his desire were very different than my desire for Damian. And what was interesting is if you're clever, you can see that Damian is wearing braces. And so although his father didn't consider him to have a disability, his doctors considered him to have cerebral palsy. That really wasn't a part of his dad's life. He was like, this is my little buddy, and we've got big plans. And his big plans were they were going to the gym to work out together. His big plans were they were going to hang out together, because remember, Dad was 16 or 17. So they were doing a lot of hanging out together. And this whole CP thing wasn't part of their makeup. And that sent most of the clinicians, including myself, into a complete tailspin. Because we were like, what do you mean it's not important? He's like, yeah, I got a boy, and that's what's important to me. I'm going to raise this boy to be a man, and he's wearing braces. Who cares about it? So I think we need to consider his decision in accessing things, because therapy wasn't high on his list. But fitness and health were high on his list, and playing in the community were high on his list, and just chilling on the front porch was high on his list. I stole this from a colleague I work with, but we all are very familiar with Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. In the new millennium, the internet drives people's existence. I came first light with this when I took my family to Mexico on a wonderful trip, and I highly recommend if you're traveling with teenagers, you would consider that. And they went we were in Mexico in an all-inclusive resort. I have my 5 stack of books. The internet went down. They had no idea what to do. He said they were pitiful. So modern families, people we're treating are driven by the internet. That also means that their desires and their ability to access things come from what they Googled this morning, or they come with an image that is horrific in their head because they've Googled their child's diagnosis, and whatever they saw on the internet was not what they were seeing there. A modern way in therapy world of how we think of disabilities is the ICF Who Model. So we used to come at it, you've got a problem. You've got cerebral palsy, you've got autism, you've got something, and we're going to fix it. Well, as we've heard 100 times today now, that's all been flipped. But what I want you to point out to you is that we still you got a problem. And as a PT, I really like to think about, well, what's happening as far as your body goes. Every other discipline will think of something else. But for us as PTs, this was important. But for us as a therapy world and an intervention world, we have to realize what activities does this family and this child want to do and can't do? And how does them not being able to do these activities limit their participation? Thought it was incredibly telling that Karen and Divya's videos were the kid on the spectrum's BFF is their mom or dad. Okay, that's just not right. That's just not right. So we don't want mom and dad to be the BFF. And so how do we change this participation? And the positives of this is everyone comes to the table with different environmental factors. And everyone comes to the table with different personal factors. And that's what we need to collaborate. And that's what we need to capitalize on, are those factors. So instead of the Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs and the internet driving our very existence, I think we really need to keep this in mind as what drives people's existence. And this answers the question that I pose to my students all the time: who cares, so what? Who cares, so what, that you have 10 degrees of freedom of your shoulder? Who cares, so what, that you missed 3 therapy visits in a row? Who cares, so what? And it might be a problem, okay, that you missed 3 therapy visits, and it may not. But why is that important to the family? And that's what we're going to get to today. As I was thinking about this, I was thinking to myself, I don't know, who cares, so what? And I came up with 3 important issues that I believe families' ability and determination to seek community services rides on. So these are the Robbie O'Shea beliefs. They haven't been published. They haven't been spoken in public yet, but I hope we can get to them. I think we have to realize that the first one, and they're in no particular order, except it was the way I was thinking, family acceptance and expectation of a child with a disability. I want you to meet Peter. This is Peter and his brother, because I called this morning, or I actually called last night at midnight and asked them to send me a picture of Peter in his stroller, and his mother laughed at me and said no. And I said, how about on your way to the bus? Could you just throw him in a stroller and take a picture? And she was like, really? Really? So she sent this to me at 6 a.m. this morning. This is Peter and his brother. His expectations of the family are this. Peter lived. He was a very, very, very sick infant. Peter lived. Peter's now 20, and his mother still says, I'm like, what's up with him? He lived. I go, okay, we're all over that. He's alive and kicking. He's good. His expectations are that he can walk short distances. And that's good enough for them, and he will always have an adult in his presence. Okay, I'm like, really? Ooh, okay. But he will always be with somebody, and that they really don't want him to have special equipment for 2 reasons. It might make them lazy, and they're a busy family, and that's something else to maintain in their busy family lifestyles. They're also my neighbors and my dear friends, and that makes my head spin. But they've taught me a lot. Peter's in a stroller, so he looks disabled. Oh, is our video gonna flip? Dang it. Okay, you're gonna have to, I flipped him 3 times and it's not flipping. So, as a therapist, I came across a wheelchair that has power assist wheels. Everybody just lay down for a minute. This is Peter's first minute in this chair. His first minute without training. The thing that I said to his mom, who's standing there away, is, your son doesn't look like a baby anymore, he looks like a man. He was 19. He had never, ever had independent mobility around the block, okay? We don't live in a dangerous area. It's okay for him to go around the block. You just can't propel a stroller. The next video, Peter at school 4 months later. He can get to the water fountain by himself. The school was all over this. I said, really? You let him go through an entire special education from the time he was 3 till the time he's 19 and no one asked? How about independent mobility? But it wasn't important to the family. So when they went to the IEP and they went to the IFSP and all those meetings, the mom was like, yeah, no, I don't want another piece of equipment. He'll learn to do it eventually. I finally said to the mom, he's out of time. So acceptance and expectations. Their acceptance of him as he was beautiful. That was fine. The expectation is that he is going to be an adult soon and he needs to live elsewhere in the neighborhood. Family support and resources. I think this is a very interesting topic because this is what drives what we can access and what we want to access. We as therapists and professionals sometimes excitedly offer tons of resources. Oh, I know this group, I know that group, you should go to therapy here, you should go to therapy there. And on Saturday you can go to this support group and you can go to that support group. In my own personal life, about 8 years ago, we inherited a person with a brain injury. Actually, she didn't have a brain injury until she came to live with us. But that's another story. But the family support and resources, as Terry pointed out, it's a full-time job, just managing the medical bills. And she doesn't have a lot, and so it's a full-time job. But for what was the family's focus? So one mom put this up. She wanted her doctors to understand their weak. The sun is in the middle, G. Okay? These are all the people that are impacted in their one son's life on a regular basis. So here you have health, the dentist, very important, as we've heard. You have all sorts of pediatric specialty people going on. So he gets pharmacology, he gets endocrine, he gets genetics, he gets cardiology, he gets GI, ophthalmology, and ortho. He also gets pediatric therapy practice, the pediatrician, all the referrals, the triages, and the scripts that she has to keep up with because, you know, they expire every 3 months. He gets medical equipment, he gets specialty pharmacy, he gets the local pharmacy, he gets toileting supplies, and he gets all sorts of stuff. That's just the medical side. This green side is all the people that support them. So they have people, they have support groups, they have therapists, they have another child, and she has a blog that she maintains to keep her sanity. Over on this side, they have the legal, the financial, the trust and estates, the attorneys, the education, the educational consultant who's also attorney to make sure his educational plan is okay. Here up in blue, she likes to advocate. So they have all sorts of information advocacy and leadership stuff. They have all sorts of family groups that they go to. And over here, is the school. So all things related to the school are here. Very, very busy. I think this mother, if I were to come and with my usual, you need to do this, you need to do that, you should do this, you should try that. Okay, really, when? When is she going to try that? So one of the things that actually influences folks and their ability and their desire to advocate is that, the very busyness. Helen Burke Taylor is an Australian OT who does wonderful research on parent stress, mostly mothers. And a couple things she's found, this is actually coming out of the University of Illinois, some things that they found are, how do you get caregivers involved? And they also use the coaching model down there and study that. And it really depends on how the therapy is provided or the services are provided. What's their approach? What materials are you using? Are you asking me to go out and spend $500 on new stuff, or are you using what I got, even if it's toilet paper rolls and margarine containers? And what are the parents' expectations, and what do the parents think your expectations are? Okay? The history and the culture and the needs of the caregiver. We had one individual say their husband was through therapy. Lots of people who went through therapy as adults will never ever return to therapy again. We've ruined them. They're like, no, unless they're in significant pain. Okay? What's the culture? Were they in a culture where it was an icky medical procedures and there's some trauma involved with that? And what's the skill and the knowledge of the therapist? You have about 30 seconds when you meet a family, whether they're going to come back to you or not, unless they're court ordered or HMO ordered, as I like to say now. They're about the same. But you have about 30 seconds. And what game do people play? And we all know this, if we do home intervention, it's a little more annoying than if we do clinic intervention is. Whatever your attendance rule is, they will figure it out, and guaranteed that's how they'll get out of the system. Oh, I missed 3 times. Sorry. Okay, I'm over it. And you're like, but you missed 3 times. Yeah, I was going to miss 3 times on day 1. You just didn't ask if I was ever coming back. Okay, so that's a big component. Helen's stuff looked at mothers and their stress level and what causes them increased stress and emotion. These were moms across Australia. Now, Australia does a much better job of the U.S. maintaining who needs what when and who gets what when. And so these were mothers across SES levels. So from indigent to very, very wealthy. From professional to what we would consider high school trained or untrained, depending on your lingo. So of all the factors that they found out, what stresses you out? Lack of sleep, more than one child with a disability, child's challenging behaviors, a preschool age child in the family, whether or not they're disabled or not, just a preschool child in the family causes people to have stress. A child who has poor emotional control, people who don't have good empowerment and sense of control over their lives, they're court ordered, they're mandated by some reason. The inability to take time for their own self, because they're so busy caring for their child. The inability to work as desired because someone needs to stay home or their child can't go to daycare for a lot of different reasons. And the high number of services the child needed and couldn't get. So in your minds, take about 1 second and pick your top 4. The 4 that you think out of this whole list sent parents right to the brink, if you really wanted to guarantee somebody needing additional mental health care. And here they are. Having a child with low joy and high sadness really bothers a mom. They don't care what the disability is, but if that child doesn't smile back or show some sort of joy on a regular basis, it breaks a mom's heart. You need to keep that in mind, because not all kids smile. Some kids can't. Some kids don't find joy. When the parents have low sense of control over their lives, it didn't matter if they were low SES or high SES. When they were feeling out of control, mom was feeling out of control, mom was in crisis. The inability to take care of themselves and participate in leisure activities and leisure time. We were just talking earlier, bunco was out the door. There was no bunco, there was no book club. Every bit of the mom's time revolved around doctor's appointments, support groups. Those aren't leisure. Support groups are necessary, but that's not a leisure activity. I don't like it when people say, I'm going to the NAD support group. Really? Like that's your time out, is you're going to talk about other people with Down syndrome? How about going to talk about going for a glass of wine somewhere or whatever? But we can't confuse the two, and I think oftentimes people do, well, you get out of the house. Well, yeah, I get out of the house to go talk about what's bugging me at home. The highest predictor was when somebody recommended a service and the parent couldn't get it. The wealthy parents couldn't get it because it didn't exist, because they would pay everything. They'd sell their house, they'd pay $1 million. It did not exist. The poor parents, it existed, and they couldn't access it for whatever, for funding reasons or whatever. So as interventionists, we need to be extremely careful about what we recommend, because that is the highest predictor of a mom throwing themselves out of control, is that we recommend all these great things and they can't get there because you are the expert. You've told them their kid would need this and they can't get there. And so you've pulled the carpet out from under them. Availability of services, kind of leading along right into that. Here we have a little guy named Tony and his brother Miguel. Tony and Miguel are an interesting couple, a little dyad that comes together. They are from a low SES family. They are from a mixed Hispanic Caucasian family. Unfortunately, they're brothers. The mom was white, the dad was Hispanic. The dad was in jail. The new boyfriend was Hispanic. The brothers were skinheads. And like, I don't say that lightly, they were card-carrying skinhead members. It's like, how's that working out for mom and the nephews? Okay, so we had that going on in the family. We had the grandma that worked and no one else worked. In fact, I humor myself because I'd say, anybody get a job today? And they all laugh. No, grandma's working. So you had some interesting dynamics that were going on. The most interesting thing about accessing services for this child is we spent a long, long time trying to figure out what was wrong with Tony. His mom, despite low education, despite low financial services, despite low emotional support services, she had so many things in place for this little guy. It was amazing. And she loved him to death. And she thought he was the best thing. And he was the best thing. One day he didn't wake up. He seized. He went from being a cerebral palsy kid to a cancer kid overnight, New Year's Eve. Mom called me and said he was at Advocate in the ICU. They think he has cancer. I go, okay, no, he has a really aggressive form of cancer. Okay, what are we gonna do? You know, what's happening? That showed me that the mom had to switch on a dime, and we were sitting in a medical meeting. So it wasn't an IFSP, it wasn't an IEP, it was a medical meeting talking about hospice for her son. And did she want him to come home, or did she want him to have hospice at the hospital, or what they would do? And again, mom was young, but a huge advocate for her son. And she's like, when's he getting PT? Now the oncologists were like, what? PT? Your kid is dying. When's he getting PT? Because as an infant, as an almost 2-year-old, every minute of his day was, when's he getting therapy? Because that's what was important. PT and OT. And it was very important to the mom. God help us if we canceled, because she would hunt us down. Okay? I had to look at her and go, Shannon, doesn't need PT. He needs a lot of stuff right now. PT isn't one of the things he needs. So it was watching somebody flip, because usually they flip from the other side, right? They go acute care, they get well, and then they go into chronic. It was fascinating to watch a family retool from chronic to acute care and not make that transition well, because we've set them up, they've got to get used to these things happen. Beth Kada and I, who led off this conference today, Beth Kada and I did a survey, and we wanted to know what therapists thought and what families thought. So the benefit of being an academic is you can do that. You can be like, I hear a bunch of therapists complaining why kids don't show up to therapy. And I hear a bunch of families complaining why they would never show up to therapy. Whoops, let me go back. Why they would never show up to therapy. I go, let's compare. So we did, because we're academics. So I kind of color-coded the differences. We asked everybody the same question. Why don't you go to therapy? There was about 25 or 50 different questions. We held focus groups, so folks who couldn't fill out the surveys could come in and talk about it. We did all sorts of stuff to get the answers, because we wanted to know. We asked the same of therapists. The therapists, 53% of the therapists said families don't come for evaluations. This is a one and done evaluation. Oh, because I can't, there's schedule conflicts. My schedule and their schedule doesn't work out. Well, in pediatrics, we like the 9 to 3 world, right? We like to work 9 to 3. It's a really nice gig. Most families don't function in those school hours. You'll notice that for 53% of the therapists, that was what they figured the families didn't come. There was a schedule conflict. For the evaluation, it's actually down here at 29%. Families will move heaven and earth to get an evaluation done. It's a one-time appointment. They'll blow off work. It's okay. For the evaluation. The other interesting thing was therapists said, well, if they can it's getting here. That's why families don't come for the evaluation. It's getting here. Again, for an evaluation, only 18% of the families reported that as a barrier. Families will move heaven and earth. They will borrow a car one time. They will walk one time to get to that evaluation. The other thing is, what the therapist didn't pick up on was the location of the appointment, because they could get where they were. Like, I'm here in my clinic. I'm here in my hospital. I don't know why you can't get here. Really, 31% of the parents said, I'll move heaven and earth, but 5 buses and 3 trains is just a little too much. This is for the evaluation. So I think we need to keep this in mind as we're asking ourselves, what makes a parent choose? Then we got clever and we said, what about ongoing therapy? Let's up the charges a little bit. And you'll see the same thing starts to happen. Again, therapists will line up and say, the appointment time availability is a problem. And actually, the family said, you're right. I can't get there from 9 to 3. How about Saturday? And all the therapists were like, are you crazy? How about Sunday? What? How about 8 at night? What? And therapists are like, no. Okay, so that is a common problem. Transportation. Therapists are like, it's got to be transportation. Only about a quarter of the people. We have a little disconnect there. Lack of funding. Therapists are like, I know why they don't come. They don't have the cash. No, that's true. 51%. But more than the therapists thought, because families are clever and they'll hide a lot of stuff, but they don't have the money for the copay, is what they don't have. And now with the new insurances, everybody's insured, but there are several families we've heard from, the copay is $50 a visit. Like, really? $50 a visit and you're supposed to come 3 times a week or 1 time a week? That's a chunk of change. Oh, crud. Availability of the therapist, again, is a bit of a bummer. It's about twice. Yeah, the family was like, I'm looking for a therapist. Can you come at 6 o'clock on a Thursday night? No. Can you come at 7 in the morning? No. Therapist is like, could you come at 10 on Tuesday? And the family's like, no. Okay. So location is another big deal. Again, huge. Therapists got to where they were going. Family is like, I can't get there. Ongoing. And most importantly, right here, although it matches a little bit, families didn't show up for ongoing therapy because they just plain didn't like you, and your goals didn't match. The therapist's goals, the family said, I want to work on this and this and this, and the family said, yeah, I don't want to work on any of that. I don't care that my kid has a wheelchair. I don't care. I want to go to the park. Keep in mind. Okay, this little guy is a guy named Sam. I haven't introduced Sam in a long time. He was the guy I treated in college. I actually blame Sam for many of my college discussions in PT school. I want to remind you that the 3 issues that Robbie O'Shea says are the reason why people choose or do not choose where they're going to go are based on the fact there's acceptance and expectations. That there's some families don't have the support services they need to get out of bed in the morning, and let alone get out of the house and pack up all the triplets. There's availability of services. You got to drive to another state to get services. Okay? And last I checked, there was no bus that ran between Illinois and Indiana. There might be now, but last I checked, there was no bus. This is Sammy. The reason I tell this story is because it keeps all of these in mind. This is Sammy's mom. You can tell he loves her to death. This is how Sammy communicates. Sammy communicates with his eyes. He can look up for yes and down for no. That's his only communication. He can move his left arm. He was born with cloverleaf skull syndrome. His mom, although she's dressed down in this picture, was the #1 female musician in St. Louis. Imagine that you're looking for a babysitter because you're the #1 and your husband is also in the same band. So they worked from 8 o'clock at night till 4 o'clock in the morning. 8th graders can't babysit then. What that was ripe for was PT students. So I'm like, oh, we can babysit then, and we can study, and we can do our wash. Rock on. One of the things, though, is Connie and David knew Sammy was going to be born with a significant disability when she was 7 months pregnant, because she read something somewhere that said your baby's supposed to move when you're pregnant, and he wasn't moving. Imagine rock and rollness, which you really can't see a lot in this picture, but a lot of earrings, a lot of hair, a lot of all that going on, right? She walked in and said, no one, if they're not a chief of a medical service, will they be involved in the birth of my child, and there will not be a resident near me. Okay, crazy lady, okay. She had the chief of neurology, the chief of neurosurgery, the chief of pediatrics, the chief of OB-GYN, the priest, that was David's pulling. He brought in the priest because everybody else was crazy. They expected Sammy to die immediately. Connie and David said, if he lasts 12 hours, then we'll do what it takes to keep him alive. He breathed down his own, can you imagine the doctors like, you are crazy. Struggled, breathe for 12 hours, and they trached him at 12 hours and 1 minute. I don't think, it was like, who could call chicken first? I was like, really? You got that? She goes, they weren't touching my baby. I said, all right then. From that moment on, they knew the kid was going to be the kid, and he was going to do what he had to do. He went to typical first grade, in a wheelchair, on a vent, with a nurse. Okay then. Rock and roll therapists, rock and roll parents who, walking down the street, you'd probably be scared of. You'd be like, what was that? Okay? With therapy babysitters who would come back from school and be like, did you try this? Try PNF. Did you try this? Did you try that? Okay? So I think I'm going to end with that vision, that family who was the least expected in the medical world generated the most supported group because they believed they could. And they weren't taking no for an answer. Because if you do that in the musician world, you don't ever succeed as a musician if you take no for an answer. So I hope that, in summary, that we now think about things a little bit differently. But people don't choose, or they may choose not to go to therapy. They may choose not to go to early intervention, even though it's free. They may choose not to go to preschool. And we have to get ourselves around that. Thank you very much.